Hey friends, hey, let me tell you how HelloFresh is helping me adjust to a car-free city lifestyle. With HelloFresh, I can get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to my doorstep. I can take fewer long walks to the grocery store and fewer trips back, weighted down with heavy grocery bags for several dinners. Instead, HelloFresh makes home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Whether you're craving hearty comfort food, trying to please picky eaters, or looking for a quick and easy dinner that's not takeout, HelloFresh has all these options and more on a rotating menu of 50 recipes to choose from every week. You can also easily customize recipes so each meal is just the way you like it. I am excited to try HelloFresh, and I invite you to give it a try too. You can get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free stitch. Applied across 7 boxes. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/free stitch. Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfolk. I'm a 4th-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together. Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. And as I say every week, this is a very special episode because you all are not going to believe that I have not one, but 2 amazing guests from the great state of Texas. And they are both fantastic bag makers. And they're going to talk with us today about a machine that will help make your bag making even better. We are happy to join Renee Thomas from Sew Mote It Be, as well as Rochelle Wadley from Mind of a Ladybug to talk with me today about their bag making journey and this fantastic industrial sewing machine called a cylinder arm sewing machine that helps them do this work efficiently and beautifully. Welcome, Renee. Welcome, Rochelle. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Stitch Please podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yay! Renee, can we start with you? What is your sewing story? How did sewing come into your life?
So I think I probably when I was little, maybe 12, 13, I decided, I wanted to go into fashion. And so, through the years, I would ask my mom for a sewing machine. She couldn't really afford it. And I think when I was maybe 14 or 15, she was able to actually save the money and get me one for Christmas. And this might be a familiar thing, being that you guys know me. I did not take that thing I opened that package. I was so excited, so happy. And then I got overwhelmed and it sat in the box until I was probably about 23. I finally took it out of the box.
Your mama was probably like, wait a second. This girl done begged me for a decade for this sewing machine. And I finally put my 2 little pennies together. Give Renee the sewing machine. I'm excited. She's excited. 10 years later. Sewing machine still in the box.
Yes. But I finally, I took it out of the box, and I think the first thing I sewed was like a little bodycon dress.
Nice.
And then I kind of moved away from fashion and went into the healthcare field. So it went kind of on a shelf. And then I would say I was maybe 27, 28, kind of came back to that love of sewing and fashion. And I started out making, I don't know if you've ever seen those little gum wrapper bags where you actually kind of fold the paper, weave it together.
Yes. Oh, and they're kind of shiny, really very fun. Yeah.
So I started doing that, and then I was like, and then, maybe I can get back into sewing on the machine. And so I would watch different things on YouTube, Facebook, and decided that, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And so I pulled that little singer out of the storage and started, making bags. I actually designed my first bag pattern, the Ariadne, on that machine.
No way.
And so once I realized, okay, this is it, this is what I'm gonna do. I started looking at industrial machines because, that singer was great. I was able to sew it, but it was a struggle. So I'm like, oh, let's look into industrials. So I think I started out with maybe like a little brother industrial.
Okay.
And then when I started to upgrade and look into something more powerful, more um, functional for me, I was looking at the Thor, like a flatbed. And then a lot of people, I would look on Facebook because, I probably researched for like 5, 6 years before I actually buy it. And a lot of people were saying how they wish they had gotten the cylinder arm when they were looking at the industrials. And so when I saw this machine and I saw that they actually had a flatbed attachment, I'm like, well, that's the best of both worlds. Let me go ahead and do that one instead. The place that I got my machine from, Sunny Sewing Machines, they actually do layaway. So I'm like, I had put a machine on layaway. So I put the flatbed on layaway. And then came around like maybe a year later. They were doing their Black Friday sale, and I was like, "Oh shoot, I have that machine on layaway. Let me
let me go see how much money I got left to pay on that. I forgot, almost forgot all about it.
Yeah, I did. Completely forgot. And so then, luckily though, by then when I remembered, I was like, you know what? Let me switch this over to the cylinder arm instead of the flatbed. And they were really like, oh, no problem, that's fine. And so they actually delivered it because they're in Dallas. So they were able to actually drive down and deliver it, set it up, show me how to get it going. And I think that day I sewed a bag on it because I'm like, oh yeah, this is one thing that did not
Wow.
sit in the box.
That is amazing. So you got this machine, it's set up, unlike the one your poor dear beloved mother worked so hard to give you when you were an ungrateful teenager. This one, oh, I see how it is now. Renee just used her own money, and then all of a sudden it's sip, sip, sew. That's all we're doing is sewing all the time.
Yeah.
But no, that's really fantastic. So that I'm really glad that the ease of use came quickly. Rochelle, how about you? How did your sewing story begin, and how did you arrive at the place you are now, where you are making bags professionally?
When I was younger, it was probably about 6 or 7, I realized that my dad always had these nice suits, and I thought he was going to a store and buying them like everybody else, and it turns out he was sewing his own suits. So me at a young age, I've always grown up with a parent sewing in the household. Now, my dad was also military, so he didn't have a lot of time to sew, but that was his thing, to just sit and have his own thing to do when he wasn't busy doing other stuff. But I would watch him sew, and I'm like, oh, like you can make clothes. So I grew up, we would have these mother-daughter banquets at church. And I remember like me and my mom having like a matching like shirt and skirt, little outfit or whatever. And I thought that was really cool. So when I was probably around 8 or 9, I tried making my very first dress, but it wasn't for me, it was for a baby doll. And I didn't know what I was doing, so it looks like a tube with like 2 straps. I was like, my baby doll got a nice little, Vogue dress, whatever.
Exactly, a little sheath dress, little summer thing.
I even hand stitched a little zipper in the back. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I mean, I still have it. I still do have it.
Wow.
But it's been retired. So time went on. I've always been involved in arts and crafts or creative arts in school. So I've always had like the creative juice flowing, but not so much dependent on sewing all the time. So after high school, I got into maybe my late teens, early 20s, kind of dabbled in like sewing a little dress here or there, whatever. Let me go back. The very first actual dress that I told myself I'm going to sew because I want to sew like my dad, that was a complete disaster. I was proud of what I made, but it was like the right kind of, I had a dream, but the fabric was completely wrong and the style was completely not right. It was
Okay.
atrocious, but I learned a really big lesson after making that first one. And I was probably 8.5, 9 years old when I did that first dress.
Wow.
I learned that you need to follow the instructions. And so my dad saw it and he's like, look, we're gonna let you make another dress, but we need to sit down. We need to take our time to learn how to read a pattern. We need to learn how to read the instructions. And the second dress I made, night and day. I mean, complete difference. It was actually something that I was very proud to make, that I could actually wear outside the house, not be embarrassed. I could wear it to church or to school or whatever. So that was like, oh, that's cool. Like I can actually make clothes. That's actually pretty cool. So as I got older, I continued to dabble here and there, making clothes for myself. And I stopped probably more when I left to go to college. I kind of was just like, yeah, sewing. I know how to sew, but I just didn't really have an interest in sewing at that time. So when I probably hit about my early 30s, I had moved away from Texas. I had moved out to the Baltimore area, and at the time I was previously married, and my ex-husband had left to go. He had been stationed elsewhere, and we had snow. We were all shut in, and I was like, man, I really wish I had a sewing machine right now.
This would be a great time to practice.
Exactly. I'm like, I had all this free time. Everything was shut down. The roads were shut down, so I wasn't going to work. And I remember I was having a phone conversation with my dad, and I was like, man, I should have gone and got me a sewing machine or something. And my dad was like, well, if you wanted to sew, I would have just gave you the sewing machine I had. And I'm like, wait a minute, you wouldn't even let me breathe on it because that was your soup making machine. You wouldn't even let me breathe on it back in the day. I had to learn on an older, like heavy duty metal Singer machine. With a tension knob that never stayed on. But, I just jammed it on there and I just kept sewing. But he was like, yeah, he's like, I would have gave you my machine. So I was like, okay, well, send it. Come on, follow through. Sure enough, he followed through. He sent me the machine, and I said, you know what? I dropped that shovel. The day that it showed up was the one day that the snow had stopped and they delivered our mail. And when the mail truck had pulled up, I was like, nope, that's my machine. Threw the shovel in the snow. I went right to Joann's. I bought 3 patterns and a whole bunch of fabric, and I made 3 little dresses with some matching purses in them 3 days. I was stuck at the house because it felt nice to get back into sewing. So I continued to sew clothes for myself through my 30s, and moved back to Texas. Life changed. I started following more indie pattern companies because I still had a heavy interest in sewing clothing for myself, sewing clothing for plus size bodies, and I had sewn like a tote bag here or there, oversized tote bags. I could sew a good, like a beach bag, that kind of thing with a zipper in it. And I started looking at more like little crossbody bags in Ankara print at first. And I was like, oh, I can make a couple of those. I had made a couple and had done okay with them at vendor sales, but I didn't know a lot about, or I hadn't really done research on all the intricacies of bags when it comes to bag making, because you can have very simple bags, you can have very detailed bags. And so I started looking more into like, okay, well, this bag making thing is kind of fun. I think I want to do more of this. And so as I started looking at clothing versus bags, I was like, to me, when I would sell items, I would sell bags, but I would never sell clothing. And people would continue to ask me, would you want to, make clothes for other people? I said, no, because that's my happy place. Sewing clothes is my happy place. I keep that for myself. But sewing bags, I will sew you a bag in a heartbeat, because that's like,
good.
You can knock out a bag in a couple of hours. And the nice thing I like about bags is bags are like accessories. You can change the look of an outfit. You can spruce up an outfit. You can make it high fashion or low fashion, however you want to categorize it. But it's not the same as a whole outfit. Like a whole outfit, like if it's a prom dress, it's a prom dress. If it's jeans, it's jeans. You can't make it something else. But you can always upscale or downscale your outfit with an accessory. So that's where I started looking at bags. Like, I like bags because I can change it up. Like sometimes I just want a little crossbody to grab and go or something like that. Right. So I actually I met Renee last year, maybe end of last year. And I stumbled across TikTok. I used to get on TikTok and always just watch like just the funny, dance videos or whatever. But I have been following some bag makers on Instagram for a long time. But when I came over to TikTok, I met a lot of other folks in BSN and I found the bag girlies. And I remember I used to always see Nikki pop up with Bag Girly Brunch. And I was like, oh my gosh, all these girls are making bags. I want to join. And I would always miss it. And then one night I saw Yemi or Tanisha, she was on there, and her and Renee were talking, and they were both using their cylinder arms. And I'm like, hold up, I need to watch this. And I was like, that's the type of, and I could understand the struggle, because when you have a machine that's domestic, you can do so much for clothes, and it was fine for clothes, but I could tell that when the machine starts to struggle with the bag, you need to level up to a machine that has the power and the tension and the pounds per press to really hold the fabric, sew the fabric, that uses the thicker stitch, the thicker threads, and all those other things that bag makers need, opposed to garment makers. And I was like, what? I need to get me a better machine. So I did buy a small semi-industrial, and it was good for a while until I realized that foot don't go up high enough. And I saw Renee's and Yemi's, and I was like, hold up, I need to go back and look at this machine again. So I had been researching a cylinder arm for probably about 4 or 5 months. And I was like, I need to, but I gotta wait. I need to plan this out, because Rochelle, you're making bags, you're selling bags, but are you ready to make that kind of investment? Because it is an investment until you make the money to pay it back off to yourself, unless you gift it to yourself or something.
Right.
So I was scouring all the Facebook, marketplace streets and everything. And I found somebody that was actually willing to sell a cylinder arm, maybe about 5 miles from my house. And they wanted a fair enough price for it. But I was like, yeah, nah, my investment ain't that big. But then I was afforded the ability to go ahead and get the machine I wanted maybe about 2 months later. And I said, you know what? This is a sign. I'm getting the machine I want, because I know it's going to pay off. And I'm glad that I did, because having the proper machines to make the things you need to make, or the things you want to make, can make all the difference when it comes to your end result, your products. And that only in turn helps people take you serious as a business, because they see that you're not just running around here using, janky machines to make so product. So
I love what I'm hearing is that, Renee, you went through years of research and in order to decide, like, is this going to be the right thing for me? And Rochelle, you had a similar process, but it was a bit more accelerated. But what I'm to understand is, how satisfied are you all with the benefits of what a cylinder arm industrial sewing machine can do versus when you were sewing on your domestic machines? So, for example, if there was some Naugahyde vinyl that was thick and you had to just do 2 layers of it, and you were trying to sew a bag strap or something, when I put that in my domestic machine, the machine is like, why do you hate me? Why are we trying to sew rocks? I thought you liked to sew clothes. This does not feel like clothes. Renee, do you remember some of the difference between when you put your first assembly, your first stack of fabric underneath the presser foot of the cylinder arm, and what that feeling was like? Hey friends, hey, I know you're enjoying the audio version of Stitch Please, and thanks so much for listening. But you're missing out on all the great stuff going on behind the scenes. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Black Women Stitch Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can see all the video versions of the podcast. Plus, you get some amazing swatch cards. You know how much I love these swatch cards. Look, see how cool these are? Oh wait, you can't see them because you are not yet on the Patreon. So when you join the Patreon, you'll be able to see this, me showing you these amazing cards. We also have some great perks at the other tiers, like discounts, swag, office hours, and more. Don't be the last sewist in the group now. Head over to patreon.com/blackwomenstitch or click the link in the show notes and become a Patreon supporter today. We truly cannot do this without you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so the first time I had to sew through like several layers of vinyl and waterproof canvas, that thing just went like butter, like smooth through. I said, "Oh yeah, I can get used to this. Like this is what I'm talking about." Like I was just like, "Okay, I'm not even sewing a bag, but I'm just like stacking layers together, just putting it through the like we've got like 4 layers of thick leather and it's just going through like butter." I'm like, "What else can I sew?" Like I'm just like running like what else can I do? Like I think I went and just because I make little book covers, so I was like,
Hmm.
and the book covers, like, usually they call for a little bit of, vinyl with, Decaville heavy, and I'm like,
Hmm.
"What if I wanna make a sturdier book cover?" So I got some chipboard and threw that through and like butter. I said, "Oh, yes.
Chip?
Yes." Like,
Are you saying
chipboard.
chipboard?
Yes, chipboard. Like butter. I said,
My
"Yes."
sewing machine would be like, "Do you want me to break? Do you want me to break? Are you trying to tear me up? Do you want me to be in the shop for 6 months?" And you explain to the sewing machine repair people that you done put some doggone chipboard in here because you think I'm some kind of circular saw instead of a sewing machine. So for you, it was the chipboard. So you were able to kind of
Yes.
improve instantly a product that you had already been offering. And you were able to see how well it worked. I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about the layout of the machine. We've been using some vocabulary that I think is useful to kind of define for folks. When you talk about an industrial flatbed machine, what is the difference between a flatbed machine and the cylinder arm? Can we describe what a flatbed industrial kind of looks like? How does that compare to a domestic machine that you just take and you can sit it on top of a table, for example?
I guess I mean it's similar. Like if you think about like the older model domestic machines, the Singers or whatever, they
Or the
came in their
Kenmores that came in a
Kenmores. They
cabinet.
came in a cabinet. So and you just pull them out of the cabinet and it's all flat, like one flat surface, like the table to the bed of the machine. It's all one flat surface. So that is what like a flatbed is.
Okay.
Whereas the cylinder arm, it kind of sits up. It kind of comes out. The table is a little below
Okay.
the arm to allow you to get material through, under, and around that arm. And of course, you do have like an attachment that you can put on your cylinder arm to make it like a
A
flatbed.
flatbed. A
Mhm,
flatbed. Okay. And
mhm,
so I think one of the things that might make sense to many people who have a domestic machine is the free arm. This
Mhm.
was an innovation early on in sewing technology where you could remove or take
mhm,
your machine out of the cabinet. And the free arm was really designed to help you sew things in the round.
mhm,
If you're doing like a cuff or a small narrow waistband or hems for knit things, you
mhm,
can just really easily just pull that right on through. That's what the free arm does. It seems like the cylinder arm takes that idea and kind of magnifies it. Can
yeah.
you talk a little bit, Rochelle, for yourself about the difference between a designated cylinder arm machine and just using the free arm feature of a regular sewing machine? What is the difference there as you see it?
So for most machines that have that free arm, if you're sliding off the bed of your machine and you're looking at that free arm, usually your clearance to get underneath there is literally maybe an inch or two. It's whatever distance is below the free arm to whatever table
Yes.
it's sitting on. So you have a
Yes.
very finite amount of space to slide things around. But like you said, you're looking with the domestic machine, you're sewing things in around. You're sewing a thin cup. You're sewing maybe a bulky hem, but you're not sewing a bag. You're not sewing something that has
Hmm.
multiple thick layers of the exterior, interior materials, the interfacing that's in the lining of between the bag, all the things that go into making a
Yes.
bag. People don't realize that bags might look simpler than clothing, but bags have a lot more internal guts sometimes than
Yes.
clothing does.
Yes.
So with the cylinder arm, you depending on the table that comes with your machine, if you have a flatbed like how Renee described, your flat surface is there, so you don't have that. You can't have stuff rotate around that free arm. You can't have stuff rotate around it because it's sitting on a flat surface. But with the
Right.
cylinder arms, you can get two different types of tables. They come usually assembled with a table, depending on where you get it from, depending on the method you go about buying it. Your machine
Hmm.
comes assembled, bolted to a table. Some people prefer a pedestal table. It has a smaller footprint, but it still has the machine up and positioned where it needs to be for you to sew and use that cylinder arm. Some
I
people get a
see.
U-shaped table where it'll still look like a regular table, but right in the middle, it has like a little U-shaped cutout that's directly underneath that free arm. So now you still have that full amount of space all around that free arm of your cylinder arm to then maneuver your bag around. Because when you're sewing bigger, bulkier, like a backpack or a big tote or something like that, you don't have that finite amount of space. Now you have, the space between the bottom of the machine and the floor, basically. So,
Oh, I see. Okay.
yeah.
I see. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you can see that that kind of utility is one of the things that people really love about
Mhm.
it. It's the fact that it takes something that could be bulky and awkward and it just makes it a little bit easier to do. One
Mhm.
of the things I've also heard a lot about is this servo motor and the speed.
Woo.
Renee, can you talk a little bit about the speed of this machine and how that compares? Because that is one of the big differences between domestic and industrial machines is that industrial machines do more stitches per minute than the regular domestic machine. How does the speed work? Or what or is the motor about speed or is it about power? Like to have enough power in the motor to force it, not force, but to drive the
Yeah.
needle down into the bobbin to do the thing that requires a stitch, it needs to have some strength behind it. So, can you share a little bit about what that motor is doing for your sewing as you're working with the cylinder machine?
So yeah, so it's just like you said, like with this cylinder arm machine, that servo motor allows you to like gives you that force to be able to drive that needle through like 5, 6 layers of thick material. Whereas a domestic, it doesn't have that power, so it kind of like stutter steps when you're trying
Mhm.
to get through thicker stuff. This
Yes.
machine, it has that power to just drive it straight through and keep moving that material through um, whatever you're sewing. So, yeah, so it's that power really. Like, cause for me, I have my machine set on the lowest possible speed because
Okay.
I'm accident prone. I've been to sewn through
Ah.
finger, arm, something because I'm going so fast. And you've seen me making a bag; it's still really fast.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's even at the lowest speed, it's still really fast. It's still really powerful. Because for me, I don't need super speed. I just need that power to be able to get through all these layers.
Right. How about you, Rochelle? You gave I was asking you about this the other day.
Mhm.
Do you use yours on the lowest speed as well? Do you kind of set up a bit of a almost like cruise control, to make sure you're not going too fast?
No, I'm like Renee. I leave mine on the lowest speed, and I think actually I was on a live the other night, and I was like, I've never pushed the pedal to the metal on this thing with it at top speed, and I know it goes up to I think was at 4,200. I think Renee, the machine goes up to like 4,200, and I'm like, but I never use it that high. I'm always like right at 500, and even like Renee said, even at the lowest speed, you can still have a good pace of sewing, which is not too slow. But the nice thing about being at a lower speed is sometimes it's easier to purposefully be able to walk your machine because it has a certain type of foot
Yes.
on there, and with that type of foot you can easily like step it along a little bit at a time and not just kind of go through too fast. But I know I put that thing on. I think I ranked it up to maybe about 3,000, and I think I even folded about 7 layers of vinyl, and I was just like, okay, this is gonna be quick, and pedal to the metal for like maybe 3 seconds, and it was just like bloop. I said, oh, yeah, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna take this back down to 500. We will never sew with it that fast. But I will say this much: a tip for me is I will rank it up that fast when I'm just doing my bobbins because 500 is slow when you're trying to do a bobbin. So if I'm making a
That's right.
bobbin, I'll knock it up. But right after I make that bobbin, I'm like back down to 500, back down to my comfort zone. So.
And the numbers you're describing here, like 500 or 3,000 or 4,200, these are stitches per minute. Is that how it's described?
Mm-hmm.
Stitches per minute. I would think 500 stitches a minute would be a lot of stitches, but then you're like 4,000. Like, I don't know what I don't do.
The mind
I feel
doesn't
like
fathom how fast that is until you just try it out.
I think for me, it would be the control. For me, I think it'd be like Renee was saying, like, for me, it's the control, because there's nothing like me getting into a groove and knowing good and well what I'm doing. And I'm humming and singing along. And next thing you know, here comes some happy accident. I done ran over something or got out of my line or something like that has not worked out. Now, I wanted to see, in terms of transitioning to this machine, there are a lot of changes that people have to kind of get used to. You have to start using the industrial needles. We're used to, in the domestic sphere, the flat back needles, as opposed to the domestic needles, which the shaft is a total circle. But there is a proper orientation. You have to seat that needle in there. You thread it from the left to the right instead of from the front to the back. You have to hold the things at tension. What are some of the things that you remember that you have to kind of adjust? Like when you're like, okay, now that I'm sitting down here with the cylinder arm, I have to remember to do XYZ a bit differently. Is that something that you still kind of have to do, like a checklist in your head every time, or have you just gotten more used to it?
I think I'm more used to it, but in the beginning, I had to, okay, wait a minute. Am I putting this needle in right? Which side does the little notch go to? For this machine, there's two tension knobs, and you have to turn them at the same time, or it throws all the tension all the way off.
Okay.
So getting used to that, like not having one tension knob to turn.
Right.
Another is changing the stitch lift. You have to actually push down the lever to actually turn the stitch length.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not going to change. It's going to stay. You'll turn the knob, but the stitch length doesn't lengthen or shorten. The height of the machine, I had to definitely get used to that. Getting a chair that goes high enough.
Okay.
At a flat, you have a regular desk or whatever. You're domestic. You can use a regular chair. With this, it's higher, so you have to get a chair that goes higher.
Oh, okay.
Another thing, like even like now, that knee lever, getting used to that.
Oh, yes, that's
Using that
right.
knee lever to lift your needle, because they have a lever in the back, but with sewing thicker materials, using the lever in the back, it doesn't go as high as you need it. But if you use that knee lever, it'll lift that needle way up.
Right.
And so now, even if I go to like a domestic machine to sew something, I'm like moving my leg, like, oh wait, this doesn't have a knee lever.
It's like, why is this broken? Shoot, wrong machine. Oh, that's great. So, okay, I understand that. How about you, Rochelle? Are there any things that you feel like when you get ready to sit down at the cylinder arm that you're like, okay, let me remember not to do this, or make sure I do this?
I think it's the same. It's some of the same kind of sewing techniques. Like with my domestic machine, I have a fixed stitch. So when I start to stitch, it will do a double stitch and it'll tie a little knot, and then it'll go about sewing. With an industrial, one of the tips is when you start to sew, you hold those tails, because if not, if your tails are not long enough, it will draw those tails back in and you're going to jam your machine. And Renee can tell you, when I first got my machine, I was doing something, my foot barely touched that pedal, and it was like we were locked up, and it was, I was like, I just got you. And now I'm about to be in tears to figure out how to get this right. And I was on a live and I was getting ready to sew something, and I literally was like, you know what, y'all, we're about to just sit here. This might take us a whole entire night, but I got to figure this out so I can get on my sewing. But the little things that she mentioned, like with the table. Now, the one thing I do like about the industrials, even when you get a taller chair to have it ergonomically helpful to you, sometimes I won't even sit down when I sew. I prefer to stand up. But you can actually, at least this particular machine from Sunny Sewing, the table that they have it on, you can raise the table up to make it taller. So if you prefer to stand and then just use the pedal, now it will get kind of weird when you try to use the knee lift, because your table's higher, and now you got to like pick your leg up in the air to hit it.
Right.
But little things like that are the things I pick up. But I just thought about something. We didn't talk about the clutch motor. We'll talk about the servo motor, but we didn't say anything about a clutch motor. So with the two differences of the motor, the clutch motor and the servo motor, the clutch
Hmm.
motor is more dependent on oil, and it's like a constantly humming, constantly running
Oh,
type of engine. Think of it like when you
okay.
see people that have a big rig and they pull it over, take a nap, and they don't cut that engine
Yes.
off. That's kind
Right.
of how a clutch motor is, and it is very loud. You definitely will sound like you're someone in a warehouse, but with the servo motor, it's so quiet that I mean, the whole house could be asleep and you're not really bugging anybody because it has a very low hum. It doesn't, and it only
Oh,
makes noise when you're actually actively using it. Other than that, it's silent. So that is a difference. So if somebody knows that they want to get a machine, I'm like, go with the servo motor. You have better control of your speed and you
okay.
have a
Okay.
lot less noise. So it is more mindful of those who are in your living
Oh,
space.
that is great to know. I had not thought about that, but that makes such good sense. And I really appreciate as you all are trying to kind of increase the quality of your pleasure while sewing. You're
Uh-huh.
not fighting it. It's making you're doing the bags because you love making bags. You make them, you sell them, it is work. But this makes it a little bit more joyous because it
Mhm.
makes it a bit easier to
Yes.
do. And I think that it's really exciting to see how you have invested in yourselves, in your business. And I guess I'm going to ask you all the last question that we ask everybody on the Stitch Please podcast, which is the slogan of the Stitch Please podcast is that we will help you get your stitch together. I'm going to ask y'all for some advice to help us get our stitch together. If somebody's on the fence, if someone's like, is a cylinder arm for me? Am I making enough bags to make it work? What kind of advice or questions, what kind of advice would you give us to help us get our stitch together if we're considering one of these? Rochelle, I ask you to go first. What would be your advice to help us get our stitch together about these cylinder arm machines?
So I will definitely say if you are thinking about getting an industrial machine, don't worry about the feeling of being intimidated. All machines are intimidating to people until they get used to using them. So that will be a very easy thing for you to get over. When it comes to thinking about the type of monetary investment that you want to make in a machine of this caliber, that's going to be one of those times you got to take an honest look at your finances because everybody has their control of their own monies and you know what you can or cannot afford to buy. But like Renee pointed out, if you do want to get a machine, it was when I first heard, I think that was the reason I probably got mine from Sunny Sewing because when I heard Renee talking about, oh, well, you can get it from Sunny Sewing and they let you do layaway. And I'm like, hold up, Christmas? like when you look for a machine, you can, if you really want to look at getting something, you can either say, hey, you know what, I'm going to get a small semi-industrial because that's geared towards the things that I want. When you pick any machine, always, always, always do your research. I tell people YouTube University is full of information. You might have to sift through to find the people who are being more honest about it, but do your research. Go to the manufacturer's website, look at the specifications. When they say like, hey, the foot only raises up a quarter of an inch, believe them. Don't say, well, maybe I can figure out a make it work. No, believe them. Always look at reviews of machines online. Look at the good reviews and the bad reviews because some of the same quirks that you might
Mm,
have about a machine, somebody else might have had that same quirk and talked about it and addressed it. So, but learn to take all those things with a grain of salt because if somebody says, hey, this machine doesn't work and they don't know what the basics about sewing, you might want to take a bigger grain of salt with that versus
that's
somebody
right. I
who's more
see.
knowledgeable and says, hey, it's a nice machine. It does what it needs to do, but it's maybe a little hard to understand or how to use it. So do your research.
Yes.
Um, if you want to make the jump, just make the jump because you have to believe in your craft. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe sometimes because you're the only person who is going to believe until people see the quality of work. And then they're like, oh, hold up. Oh, you can do this and you
That's
can do this
right.
with that. Okay. Okay. And it's a way for people to see those unseen talents a lot of times that people don't normally see. So pray on it, think on it, look at what you can do. I told somebody the other day, you can't fly if you don't jump. So,
Beautiful. Renee, thank you so much, Rochelle. I appreciate that. Renee, how about you? What advice do you have to help us get our stitch together?
So for me, it's like really short, simple. If you're thinking about getting an industrial and you're like, is it for me? Is it something I want to do? Like, if you're already thinking about it, it's for you. Like, if you're at a
Mm,
place where you're thinking about an industrial, you need an industrial. Like, you've already been through those struggles of using your domestic to do something.
Mhm.
And so now you're looking at, oh, is it something? And you're only waffling because of the cost. So in that sense,
Mm,
do what you can afford. Do your, like she said, do your research. Look at places that do layaway. So you might be like, okay, this is
yes.
what I want to do. And like for me, I was still in the military. So once I, retired from the military, I was like, okay, now I want to go full force into my business. It's time to get that machine out of the layaway. Let's get going.
I
So just
love
kind of
it.
pace yourself. And like I said, if you're thinking about it, it's for you.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's something you really need. It's something you, because you've been through the struggles, so you know. Okay, yeah, this is what I need. I do need it. I've tried to make that bag on that domestic or semi-industrial and have broken 5 needles on one bag.
Mm.
It's time.
Yeah, I love that. The fact that you're thinking about it means that you're already in the process of considering it.
Mhm.
And that then you need to decide how and when you invest in yourself. Oh, that's beautiful. Y'all, this has been so fantastic. Again, y'all, I have been joined by the amazing Renee Thomas of So Mote It Be and Rochelle Wadley of Mind of a Ladybug. You can find them on all platforms at those names. We're going to include links to their websites in the show notes as well as to their socials. Thank y'all so much for being with me today. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time. So stepped out of my shell,
I'm so
time to
glad. I'm so glad. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much for spending time with us. And I know this is going to be really helpful, encouraging to folks. So thank you both. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You've been listening to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you joining us this week and every week for stories that center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. We invite you to join the Black Women Stitch Patreon community with giving levels beginning at $5 a month. Your contributions help us bring the Stitch Please podcast to you every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.